other clicks on that same search. It gives us a lot of indications around whether it was good for them. So the key then is, right, we package this all up, and that's what makes it lower TCO. And so when you think about that packaging in comparison to what's out there, on the Google side, you'll find that things like the servers, the storage, and the configuration and performance tuning are all out of the box. Right? You're not actually creating complex projects on that or buying lots of hardware or worrying about what's my storage profile going to be if I choose certain search features, which might change my whole project profile and create different risks because I've decided I wanted this feature and all of a sudden it's 10 times double storage. If you think that's crazy, it really happens. Then when you go to maintain it, typically we're looking at around 20% of the full-time equivalents against other search solutions because you're not making a lot of those trade-offs over time after the expense that the consultants have left. Of course, that has the same implication on implementation. The whole system works cleanly. That's a big deal because it means you can get back to the business benefits. You can get back to actually getting the content connected in. The system comes with a range of connections, every possible enterprise system you can imagine. If it doesn't have a connector for what you want, it comes with a framework, which makes it very straightforward for you to build that connection to that crazy one system. We get this in government all the time, right? I think of the government as almost like Noah's Ark. They've got two of everything. It's like the archive of society's old technologies. And so we constantly come up with, can you connect to this? And the answer is yes, right? We may not have the connector internally. We have a partner who can take it there safely using the existing framework. It's the same framework we use to build our own connectors, right? So you're really on stable ground with that. Security, right? Fairly obvious. One person can see it, one person can't. But this can get really complicated as you have hierarchies and other kinds of privileged organizations. And sometimes we'll see a SharePoint implementation with over 2,000 security assignments to a single document. You don't think about that when you're one of them. When you're 2,000 long on the GSA side, you've got to be able to handle that at scale. Language. We actually bake in the Google.com language libraries. So when we say we support Chinese, it's not that we have UTF-8 encoding, right, that we can handle like representing a Chinese character in the result. We mean we can do tokenization. We mean in German, which has this tendency to smush words together, we can unsmush them, right? So it's not just representing the characters, but we can do decompounding. We can do stemming, lemmatization, a whole range of things, and not just that we do them, but we do them as well as Google.com. And there's really no one else in the world that can do that. But then we also go a step further, and we include language translation. So you can actually take that Japanese, I think, range stuff, and move it over into English in the search results. So if you have multi-regional offices that have different languages, very straightforward for you to benefit from the learnings that are going on elsewhere. It goes up to the cloud, but it's actually a special part of the cloud that we created for enterprise. So there's no logging, there's none of the consumer stuff, and it gets rid of the problem where people will copy and paste into Google.com Translate, which is logged and is not HTTPS. Social. This is a big deal, right? We see a lot of information coming in signal form from social behavior, and we're doing more and more with this at Google. I'm sure everyone's familiar with Google+. We're actually also integrating with systems like Jive in the field, and we've been able to take that and index it. But beyond that, you can actually go further than just the passive signals or what you're getting out of Jive or what you're getting from the click streams and the social learning of the click stuff. You can actually actively engage these users. This always surprises me. People tend to be more civic-minded than you'd expect. You allow them to basically boost content based on looking at a set of results and saying, I like that one. And people actually do this. Now, if that seems odd to you, there's actually, I was giving a speech at a hotel recently in Las Vegas. It was the Mandarin, Mandalay Bay, and it turns out there were more reviews at that time for bounced dryer sheets than there were for the Mandalay Bay Hotel. So it's shocking, right? But people will actually review a bounced dryer sheet, and they will +1 your search results. And that social wisdom of the crowds makes it right back in. So Northern Trust, just to take an example of an insurance company in the US, actually saw that the social click rate, so when a social suggestion came up, the click rate on that suggestion was 33%, which is astonishingly high. And so these have real great value because people will actually expose the stuff that is the high-value content in any given query. And you could never anticipate what that's going to be, right, as a central administrator. So the social stuff has a lot of value. Dynamic navigation. Who here has ever shopped on an e-commerce site? I mean, everyone has, right? Everyone's seen the navigation on the left-hand side. Do you want it priced 0 to 100, 100 to 200, 300 above, etc.? That's a form of dynamic navigation. There's a lot of science behind this. There's actually a guy in the library space called Toad back in the 1920s before there were computers. It worked with like punch cards. Actually, punch cards was like little library cards. You pull these polls. Very, very complicated. We've done this much better. You no longer have to use physical polls. So we can display these navigation structures in the context of a search. You type a search for whatever. And just like the price buckets at that e-commerce site, you're going to see metadata show up that wrappers that specific search. Now the next question you get in most companies is, well, how do I get that metadata? I didn't necessarily have an ECM strategy. As I said at the beginning, Google is going to say, that's great. You don't have to have an ECM strategy. So one version of answering how do I get metadata is get it automatically. Let Google look at your corpus and pull out entities, pull out people, places, things. And increasingly, we're going to do more and more of this at Google. So that you can take that baseline you have and take value from it without having to go and do an ECM strategy. And that's entity extraction. Expert search. This is a big one for us, right? Getting back to social, not all the knowledge is captured in articles. And so we want to allow people to search for each other, find each other, and think of people as a first-class entity in the system, right? So that you can start to attribute more and more stuff to what a person might know based on what they're writing, for instance. This is, again, another field of research we're doing more and more with Google, and hopefully tying people together in the enterprise. I often think of apps and the whole product suite there, and the way that it thinks about collaboration as the second part of the story. It's an important part of the story, because when I'm working on a document, I want to be able to interlink it and work with others live. But the first part of that story is, how do I know who to work with? How do I know what's out there to work on? And that's very much this expert search. And then document previews. Probably most of us has been on Google and discovered by accident that if you hover over a document, you can get a full preview. We're actually going one step further with the Google Search Appliance. I hate to say we're doing better than Google.com, that maybe it's not fair, but we're actually going to allow you to flip through the preview. So you can actually hover over a result, you'll see the PDF or that representation that's kind of a nice visual, and you can click through page by page before you have to click onto the result and drill into the underlying system. Of course, all secure so that if you don't have access to that, you won't see it. And then lastly, the features. There's a lot of cool stuff, there's a lot of great features I didn't cover, but if you take them all together, what we're trying to do is allow that one very simple interface, that search box, to be your map to the enterprise information world. And there's a piece of that that's very responsive, right? You put in a question, and we try to do our best to bring you back an answer. But there's another piece that's suggestive, right? The goal of it is to actually expose ideas you didn't know how to ask for, this notion of discovery. The piece of that starts with dynamic navigation, the ability to wrap your query in menus, or with Query Suggest, that ability that Google has to autocomplete your query with a range of ideas. But if we push that farther and farther, we're talking about Suggest, almost reading your mind and saying, you know what, I think you might be interested in. And also being able to paste it together. So when you think farther out to the future, the ability to almost create, if you imagine, a New York Times that's specific to you. So when you came in based on your past query history, based on who you know socially, based on the next thing you're asking about, we can actually create an editorialized content publication with relevance weightings exposed roughly by the size of information on a page, much like you have in the front page of a newspaper. And we think that's where the future of search is going. A little work between here and there, but we'll find a lot of information on the way. With that, I think I want to bring up Dara Murphy to talk a little bit